Start again? All right. When I was 12 years old, way back in 1978, I met two girls who I really wanted to be friends with. But first I had to answer an all-important question: which guy was my celebrity crush? Now, I answered, well, honestly, in the way I thought any normal Canadian 12-year-old girl would, Vincent Price. I was immediately informed that choosing a 67-year-old horror icon was the wrong choice. But they were very nice girls, very helpful. They actually gave me a choice between two teen idols. First, I could have a crush on then 17-year-old Leif Garrett, who had just released, you can Google "I Was Made for Dancing" by Leif Garrett from that era. I don't necessarily recommend you do so, but you certainly can. Or 18-year-old Scott Baio, who you should definitely never Google at all, especially with the past 8 years of his adoration of all things MAGA and Donald Trump. And I can assure you, actually, I did indeed dodge the Scott Baio bullet. But what I never told my friends, or really anyone, was why I picked Leif Garrett. And it wasn't because of his thick, slightly frizzy blonde hair or his nice, tight leather jacket and outfits that he wore. It was because I really loved in school all of the colorful stories about the Vikings, Eric the Red, and his lesser-known son, Leif the Lucky, and that's why I chose. Unfortunately, my mother was informed of my now new celebrity crush, and she was thrilled that I had finally shown interest in a man under the age of 65. So she bought me a baby blue, scoop-necked, Leif Garrett t-shirt, which she made me wear in front of people. She took photos, and sad to say, this was not going to be the last time my attempt to be a normal heterosexual girl was going to lead to extreme embarrassment. Now, at 12 years old, I barely knew what heterosexuality was, let alone what homosexuality was. The only reason why I even knew the term was because the boys my age found all of those cartons of homo milk that were at the Max Milk. They found that endlessly hilarious, and so the joke had to be explained to me. Just as I didn't actually hear about lesbians until I was around 16 years old, when the boys my age thought the island of Lesbos in ancient history was endlessly hilarious. Now, unfortunately, around that age, I had actually already had one lesson in homosexuality, and unfortunately, that came from the not-so-lovely Anita Bryant. She was a former beauty queen, she was a former singer, and then she was the star of a relentless series of orange juice ads that warned us of the great danger that a day without orange juice was indeed a day without sunshine. However, by around 1977, she learned of a far worse danger to all of us than low vitamin C. It was that in Dade County, Florida, there was a new ordinance that said you could no longer fire a homosexual teacher for being homosexual. Well, this wouldn't do for poor Anita. So she organized a huge campaign that eventually became nationwide to overturn this ordinance and any non-discriminatory laws for homosexuals. And while Anita certainly was not the first celebrity to spread the very toxic belief that gay rights movements were only growing because gay teachers were recruiting from the naturally heterosexual children, because of course that's how they are born, and then you recruit them into this deviant lifestyle, because otherwise the whole gay movements would just die out because they couldn't have babies. Well, unfortunately, she was one of the most successful celebrities. Within less than a year, she had that Dade County ordinance overturned and then went after adoption rights and any other form of rights, and then took it nationwide. And the only good thing that came out of that is that she did indeed lose her job as the orange juice spokesperson, because the Florida Citrus Commission wasn't amused when a gay rights group came up with the slogan that a day without human rights is a day without sunshine. So, now, when I was watching Max Keeping reporting the news in the late 70s, I'm not going to even pretend I knew or understood everything that was going on. What I did see was the firing of many gay teachers. And in some cases, I witnessed the devastation that these people were experiencing, because this was the job they'd always wanted. This is the job they felt that they were meant to do. And at the time, deep in my heart, I wanted to become a teacher. And not just because I actually did have a huge crush on Karen Valentine. Now, I do highly recommend you Google Karen Valentine, room 222, cute as a button. Oh my gosh. But no, this was my dream. I was going to become a teacher. And while, of course, at the age of 10 and 12, it's a little melodramatic to believe that if I stepped out of line, Anita Bryant was going to find me and personally crush all of my dreams. But I realized, looking back, that my first lesson in what homosexuality was that it was dangerous to be a homosexual because you could lose things that were important to you. And this was a message that was only reinforced in high school in 1981, whereas when the media did an excellent job during the AIDS crisis of making it clear that homosexuality was equal to death. So at that point, I was too scared to even consider being anything other than normal, and as normal as possible. Unfortunately, during my 20s and 30s, several clues began to accumulate that I perhaps wasn't as straight as I thought I was. One of the very first clues, one of the first young men that I dated, after about 6 months, just in total frustration said, "Do you even find me attractive?" My unhelpful answer was, I don't know, what does that feel like? Clue number 2, a couple years later at university, a different young man asked us, where's our relationship going? And as you can see the cliche coming a mile away, my answer was, what relationship? Because as far as I was concerned, yeah, I'm sure after the last couple of months we'd been going to lunch, but that's because, we let out of our anthropology course, around lunchtime, and we both were going in the same direction. There was a nice little cafe, and maybe he should have paid for more of those lunches if he wanted me to think that we were dating. But the sad thing is that I was completely unaware that we were in any way flirting, dating, and meanwhile I found out he had actually changed his major to anthropology in order to pursue a relationship with me. So then there's always my personal favorite is clue number 45, possibly clue number 45 through 87, which was the cliche that everybody experiments in college. So of course I experimented while I was at university. Maybe every woman does, or enough people do. That's totally and utterly normal. And I ignored the fact that it took me 9.5 years to actually earn my BA. So perhaps experimentation wasn't the best word for what was happening. Now, at this point, I certainly had a number of people, family, friends, and of course those last 2 men I mentioned, wondering what the hell was wrong with me. And, occasionally I did too. I do think it is really appropriate to ask, why didn't it occur to me at any point that, hey, maybe these things aren't working out, because just maybe, I could be a lesbian. Maybe, just maybe. It was the 1990s. Very positive, powerful messages were out there about gay rights, and just wonderful, in fact, message from the community itself, from the 2SLGBTQA+. But it was that very message they were sending out in the 90s and beyond that made me think I didn't belong, because they weren't just simply countering the very toxic belief that gay was some sort of lifestyle choice you were brainwashed into thinking was an attractive one. They argued that being queer was something they'd always known about themselves. And there were powerful stories based on genuine life experiences of people realizing in their teens and in, just before puberty and even as children that they were queer. Whereas the only thing I had known since childhood was how deeply confusing I found people and relationships. So I figured that I couldn't possibly. So it was all the way to when I turned 46 and my mother died before I ever considered it again. And for those who've experienced grief, it's very complex experience, and all of my certainties over the year afterwards just seemed to go up in the air to the point of, who was I? And I was very surprised that not all of these certainties returned. So that when Clue 236 finally came along, I was a little bit more open-minded. I had a magazine. I was expecting to read a lovely article on Lucy Lawless, AKA TV's, Xena Warrior Princess. That was Clue number 200, but we'll touch on that later. And I just opened it up, and I was confronted with a photo of her in a negligee. And that was the moment I was willing to admit that I was at least 50% gay, 75% if you took me by surprise. And it is the next year, there was a lot of reassessment of all of, say, the clues and all of the mishaps of my dating years, and coming to realizations. And I do want to actually apologize to my straight friends, because during that year, they couldn't even enjoy a nice movie with a nice heterosexual love scene without me suddenly bursting out, oh my God, so I was always looking at the women. And then I finally did actually come out to family and friends at the age of 48. And apparently came out again and again and over again until it actually became a bit of a running joke of, have you seen Victoria recently? How's she doing? Oh yeah, I saw her last week. She's gay, Still gay. And as what my best friends explained, it was if I believed they were going to somehow forget between 1 week to the next. And I realized it was no, I was afraid I was going to forget, because it's not like I woke up one morning and, whoop, I'm gay, but it didn't feel entirely natural to suddenly come out at 48. And it certainly didn't feel normal to me. And I do know that without the loving support of my many straight friends, I wouldn't be able to stand here today and say, this is my normal now. Thank you so much for listening.